poetry? Anybody like poetry? Yeah? You like poetry? If you kind of sometimes like poetry, give me like that. Yeah, kind of sometimes. Yeah. I really like poetry now. I haven't always. You know, I've gone through different phases in my life where I've appreciated poetry in different levels. Sometimes poetry has been so meaningful for me. The way we can express big thoughts and ideas and images and pictures with few words. The way poetry can create feelings in us that we didn't know were there or weren't just previously, and it can trigger things. There's been times in my life, though, honestly, I have felt impatient. Like, I just don't have time for this. I don't have time for poetry. Because poetry isn't like reading for information. It's not like reading a novel where there's a narrative and a plot that guides you along and keeps you turning the pages. Poetry is, you have to read it slowly. In fact, you have to read it as slowly as you speak. And so it takes a while to get through it. And you can't rush it or it's not right. It just doesn't do anything. At least that's how it works for me. I don't know about you. But if I'm not really ready to read the poetry, if I just look at the words, I don't really get anything. I have to read it slowly and intentionally, like I'm prepared to read it. You have to be in the mindset to receive it, right? The Bible has some great examples of poetry. Some books are entirely written in poetry, like the Psalms, one of the longest books. Many of the prophets are written in poetry, the prophetic books. Sometimes they will have a mixture, and they will go back and forth between some narrative or some background and information and then poetry. Some books are like bookended, like Job. It's mostly poetry with a front section and an end, kind of prose stuck on. But the prophets used poetry a lot to do what poetry does best, which is explain or show things that can't be just explained. Things that are not straightforward. Things that we don't have the words for. Poetry can help us to communicate that. And that's why the prophets used it frequently. And there's some beautiful, beautiful poetry. And I wanted to share this passage with you from Isaiah. Now, Isaiah is a very, very long book. Lots of it is poetry, but not all. It's mixed in with some narrative. And this comes from chapter 65, which is the second to last chapter. So we're looking at the very end of Isaiah. And there's been a lot of times that the message that Isaiah has been given by God to share, and it's difficult. It's not great news. It's, if you continue living like this, things are not going to go well. bad things are going to happen. Sometimes it's, well, too late. You already made the mistakes. This is what's going to happen. There will be consequences. And here, at the very end, Isaiah is talking to people who are returning from the exile and is sharing a vision of a future that God hasn't yet created. So, of course, he does that through poetry. Starting in verse 17. Look, I'm creating a new heaven and a new earth. Past events won't be remembered. They won't come to mind. Be glad and rejoice forever in what I'm creating, because I'm creating Jerusalem as a joy and her people as a source of gladness. I will rejoice in Jerusalem and be glad about my people. No one will ever hear the sound of weeping or crying in it again. No more. No more will babies live only a few days, or the old fail to live out their days. The one who dies at 100 will be like a young person, and the one falling short of 100 will seem cursed. They will build houses and live in them. They will plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They won't build for others to live in, nor plant for others to eat. Like the days of a tree will be the days of my people. My chosen will make full use of their handiwork. They won't labor in vain, nor bear children to a world of horrors, because they will be people blessed by the Lord. They, along with their descendants, before they call, I will answer. While they are still speaking, I will hear. Wolf and lamb will graze together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. But the snake, its food will be dust. They won't hurt or destroy at any place on my holy mountain, says the Lord. Let us hear what the Spirit is speaking to God's people. That is a description of a profoundly different world. A very different world than the one that we can currently see and experience. In fact, if we're being honest, it's a little hard to believe, isn't it? Especially looking back as we are these thousands of years. I don't know about you, but sometimes I look at that and I'm like, yeah, okay, sounds good, but yeah, right. If it hasn't happened yet, when is it going to happen? I mean, is this even real? Or is it just fairy tale, imagination? I think we have a hard time seeing this new world, the new future. And most often what we do is put it off on the afterlife and say, okay, that's a description of what heaven is going to be like, and that's going to be super great and cool. Okay. But that's not what Isaiah was talking about. Isaiah was talking about God doing a new thing here. Now, Jesus also talked about the future. Sometimes Jesus' message about the future was also scary or uncertain. In the Gospel according to Luke chapter 21, people are observing this beautiful temple where he's teaching. This temple that's we call the Second Temple period. It's beautifully constructed and was finished by Herod and bedazzled, like jewels everywhere, marble and gold over the top everywhere, on the floor. We're talking like gold toilets here, okay? Amazing. And Jesus stands there in the temple, the courtyard, and he says to them, nations and kingdoms will fight against each other. There will be great earthquakes and wide-scale food shortages and epidemics. There will also be terrifying sights and great signs in the sky. But before all this occurs, they will take you into custody and harass you because of your faith. They will hand you over to synagogues and prisons, and you will be brought before kings and governors because of my name. This will provide you with an opportunity to testify. Make up your minds not to prepare your defense in advance. I'll give you words and wisdom that none of your opponents will be able to counter or contradict. You will be betrayed by your parents, brothers and sisters, relatives, and friends. They will execute some of you. Everyone will hate you because of my name. Still, not a hair on your heads will be lost. By holding fast, you will gain your lives. Again, Holy Spirit, speak to us through this word. I think many of us find it easier to believe what Jesus is saying here than to believe what Isaiah is talking about. I think that for some reason, we understand or are more ready to accept these words of warning and foreboding. And if you go on the internet, there are plenty of people professing to be Christians who talk about signs and wonders. And they read these very verses and say, see, it's coming. The pandemic, the earthquakes, the hurricanes, the disasters, the persecutions. It's happening. And they identify things that are indeed real and happening now with these things that Jesus said. Why, then, do we not see, or maybe you're seeing it and you need to let me know, but I don't see a whole bunch of people taking texts like Isaiah and saying, look, it's happening. God is doing new and wonderful things. Why are we so much more willing to accept these warnings, these dire, urgent predictions of disaster, than we are to imagine a new and wonderful world? I was pondering and struck by that difference. How many of us quickly adopt, see, things are going terrible, end times. But I very rarely see people saying, look at what's happening. It's brand new. Something's about to happen. That's wonderful. Well, maybe it's because those people like Isaiah can't tell us exactly what the new heaven and new earth, the new ways of being are going to be like. You can't just snap a picture and say, see evidence, because it hasn't happened. We don't have a picture. In fact, sometimes we don't even know what exactly it will be or what kind of picture we might even paint. And we have to do what the prophets do, which is create feelings, images, put words together in a way that hint to something more, different, bigger, just as real, but just not as visible. I know that the church is undergoing a huge transformation. And I don't mean just our church, and yes, we will see it, but the church as a whole is changing. It has changed considerably. If we know our history of the last 50 to 100 years, and I think it still has a considerable way to go. And I believe that what God is doing, God is recreating a new church and a new world. And it will be wonderful and good. But I can't tell you exactly what it's going to look like. I can't tell you that. I can't paint that picture. I can't present that evidence because we don't yet have the reality that we need in order to understand the new thing, the new way. It's as if I am trying to explain a concept in a foreign language, but one that I haven't learned yet. And all I have is the words that I already know. Very little in the new language. Besides that, this is what occurred to me. The Spirit said, that's okay, because even if I could paint you this picture, draw you an example, or the steps, or how this will take shape in the future. If I were to do that, it would require no imagination and no faith on your part, or on my part, for that matter. If I could show it to you, that would mean that I already knew it, and you can't have faith in something that you already know. That's not the definition of faith. Faith is believing that there is a reality that you can't yet see. So if I just said, here, everybody, this is the way we go. This is what it's going to look like. Here's the transformed church in 50 years. This is what it's going to look like. Then, well, it couldn't happen that way because I would have had to have already been there. And we haven't invented time travel yet, despite what Doctor Who would lead you to believe. So, what we can do, since we can't paint a picture, we don't have it, we don't even have the language or the resources to show what kind of newness is about to happen. All we can do is go back to this poetry of Isaiah and look at the feelings it creates. See, it says, they will be like this. It doesn't say exactly what it is, right? Isaiah says, no more will people build for others to live in, plant vineyards that they will not eat from. It says they will build houses and live in them. They will plant vineyards. They will eat their fruit. But it doesn't tell you how to build the house. It doesn't even tell you what type of house we're going to be building. This is not blueprints. This is poetry. Because we have to feel it before we can see it. We have to know it in a different way. We have to know it before we can prove it. And a lot of people in our world tell us that that's not a thing. They will tell you, well, if you can't prove it, if you don't have evidence, then it doesn't count. It doesn't exist. You are making it up, or you're just dreaming. That's not real. And I say with Isaiah, it is too real. You just don't have the right eyes yet. We just can't see it yet. And it will be different. We know that it will be different, and maybe we're going back to the root of why it's easier to believe the bad things that we have seen or experienced or have a framework for. Why it's easier to believe that than it is stuff like this. The other reason, we don't really want to change. We don't really want to lose anything that we have. So maybe we better just be safe and stay with what we know. Believe what we can see. And don't set ourselves up for believing something that can't yet be seen. Believing in a world that might require us to be very different from who we are. The end, the last verse in this chapter is literally like a copy and paste from Isaiah chapter 11. Interesting. Why would we repeat that? Why I repeat things is because I want people to hear them, or I want to remember them, and I have to say it over and over to myself. Wolf and lamb will graze together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. But the snake, its food will be dust. They won't hurt or destroy at any place on my holy mountain, says the Lord. We will not experience violence. We will not have to eat or be eaten, which is really all we can imagine in our world today, because that's how things work. And we think in order to survive, we've got to do likewise. I say no. God's creating something different. God has a plan. It will require us to do things that we might not consider normal, natural, things that would not come easy to us. I'm sure the lion would rather eat the ox. But I think what Isaiah is saying here is things will be fundamentally different. And what you think is just the way of the world is not going to be my way. That's my interpretation anyway. And I hope that you would engage in a challenge this week. And that is to be open to a new explanation, a new way of thinking, new way of doing something that maybe you hadn't considered, maybe not earth-shattering. Maybe you think it's just, eating at a different place or fixing your food a different way. Trying a non-meat option for dinner. Something like that. Try living into a different way. Practice. Because I think this is what we're getting called into. So let's get ready. Let's go with it. Let's practice living into new realities, being in new ways, being ready for whatever wonderful new thing God is doing. I want to thank you again for being here, for making this a part of your morning. I don't know how far you had to drive or walk or log in from across the world. We're thrilled that you're here, that you made it a point to be here and start your week in worship with us. If you are not a member of this community of faith, and would like to investigate what that means, would like to see about being involved in something that's larger than yourself, if you want to know more about accepting Jesus and letting him be the leader of your life, then we want to invite you to consider joining us on this journey. We're all at different places. Nobody's in a contest or a race, because we believe that we're going to get there when we all get there, and we'll figure it out together. If you'd like to make that decision, you can either come and let me know as we sing our closing song today, or you can contact me during the week or set up a time for us to visit, and I would love to help you find that place that God is leading you next on your journey. So let us stand and sing together, Be Thou My Vision. And this is one of my favorite hymns. I know I've said that before, but this for real really is. Feel it. Sing it like you feel it, like you know it, even if you don't know it. I pray for you. Thank you. I pray for you this week, new vision. Maybe you won't see the picture, but you can see without your eyes. You can know in a new way. God is our vision, now and always. Go in peace.